All right, today we're going to talk about the Battle of Gettysburg. There's a picture there of the Gettysburg, Pennsylvania battlefield. It's going to be a key battle in the Civil War, one we need to know about. It takes place in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's a 3-day battle from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863. It's going to be the turning point of the war. And when I say turning point, it's going to change who's winning. All the early battles are being won by the Confederacy. Well, most of them. From the first Battle of Bull Run to Fredericksburg, all the Union attacks at Richmond are being stopped by General Lee and the Confederate Army. This battle is going to change the course of the war. What's going to happen is Confederate General Robert E. Lee thinks that a victory in the North would make the Union quit the war. He thinks if he could just take his army once up into the North, perhaps Pennsylvania, and beat the Union up there, people are going to be in the Union are going to be sick of fighting the Confederacy and want to quit. So the Confederate Army is going to move north into Pennsylvania, and they're going to be hidden behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'll show you what that looks like. So here's a map. We have Maryland over here, Virginia, and up here above the dotted line is Pennsylvania. They're all going to head towards this place called Gettysburg. This gray area here, that's the Blue Ridge Mountains, part of the Appalachian Mountains. Here's Manassas down here. So what's going to happen? You're going to see the Southern Army. They're moving north. June 3rd, June 13th, June 15th, June 28th. We're talking about 70,000 men. So we're talking about a lot of people moving to the north, just west of these Blue Ridge Mountains. A week or a week and a half, 2 weeks behind the Confederate Army, the Union moves north. June 17th, June 28th, all headed towards Gettysburg. These names are the commanders of the different armies. So they're heading north. General Lee wants to have his big attack in the Union, in the North, to make the North quit the war. The Union follows the Confederate movements on the other side of the mountains. 80,000 Union forces versus 70,000 Confederates. If at any point you need to pause so you can write down some notes, please do so. But you do that. General Lee receives word from a scout that the Union Army is close. Lee changes directions and both armies head towards Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Gettysburg is a small town where many roads meet. There are hills on one side of the town. What we know about wars back in the 1800s, the army on the high ground has the advantage. The army that controlled those hills would have an advantage during any battle. There's a feeling on both sides. The side that loses this battle will lose the war. Back to that same map. Back to that same map. There's Gettysburg. So the Confederate Army's here. The army turns south or towards Gettysburg, down the several roads that lead there. And here's the Union Army's over here. The Union Army's headed there as well. A small group of Union soldiers are going to know the Confederates are coming, and they're going to fight them on these roads to slow them down so they can't get to Gettysburg first. A small number of Union soldiers under General Buford know the Confederate Army is coming down a long, narrow road. General Buford of the Union Army fights the Confederates along the road to Gettysburg to prevent the Confederate Army from taking the high ground on the hill, which they do almost every battle before that. At the end of the day, the Union soldiers are pushed back, but the Union Army arrives, so the big part of the army arrives, and takes positions on the hill outside of Gettysburg. So there it is pictured there. So the Union's at the top of those hills. Just about the first time they have the good ground. So here we see the Confederate Army in red. They're pushing down this road. General Buford attacks them as they're coming down the road to slow them down. Eventually the Union gets pushed back, but that's okay, because they get pushed back and go on the high ground, which is pictured on the right, outside of Gettysburg. That's the end of day 1. Gettysburg, day 2. General Lee has a decision to make. Attack the Union or withdraw, retreat, and fight another day. General Lee decides to attack because the army is anxious for the fight. Everybody wants to do it. Both armies are there. Why not fight? They think. The Confederates are not fighting defensively, which has been very successful for them up to this point. They're going to be the ones attacking up the hill this time. Cue the dramatic music. The Confederates attack by trying to surround the Union Army by attacking the ends of the line. The ends of the line are called the flank. One of the Union heroes is Colonel Chamberlain of Maine, who protected the flank against several Confederate charges. This is a picture of one of the flanks. It's called Little Round Top. The Union's at the top of this hill. The Confederates are going to come up this hill and try to get around the flank of the Union Army. So here's the battle map. The blue is the Union. The Confederacy is going to try to come up these hills here and get around the flank of the Union Army. So the Union Army moves up to here, and this is this Colonel Chamberlain we were talking about. Has a big stand at the top of Little Round Top, where the Confederates come up the hill over and over and over again, till the Union's pretty much out of ammunition over in this section of the battle. And in the last Confederate charge, the Union's stopping the attack by using their guns like clubs, using sticks to defend the ground. Because if you can get around the flank of your opponent, then you can start to surround them. You always want to try to prevent that from happening to your army. This is another picture of Little Round Top. This is where the Confederates tried to outflank the Union. That's the end of day 2. Here's day 3. Pickett's charge. The Confederate Army attempts a direct attack against the middle of the Union line, across an open field, uphill against a well-protected Union Army. This attack is a huge failure. So on day 3, they're not going to try to go around the flank. They're going to try to go right at the middle. Here's the field the Confederates are going to try to cross. They're going to come out from these trees, cross this field, go up this hill at the Union Army that's kind of protected behind this stone wall. That's a tough attack. If you hear a noise, it's trying to dry a shirt, so I have a clean shirt. On day 3, the Confederates under command of Pickett and Trimble charged the center of the Union line. They had to cross a big open field with the Union above them. This is known as Pickett's charge because he's one of the leaders. So, instead of going around the sides, the flanks of the army, this time they're going to attack the center. Across that field, coming out of the trees across that field and up the hill. Kind of a painted recreation of the attack. Dramatic. These are people from nowadays recreating the battle. Can't really see the hills in this picture. At the end of the battle, the Union, the North, suffered 23,000 casualties, and the South lost a third of its army. That's 28,000 casualties. This is where the population advantage for the North plays an important role. The South can't replace their men because they have a smaller population. The North can. They can keep drafting new soldiers. So even though the casualties are relatively the same, the South is unable to replace those men. North is. The South would never recover from this defeat. General Lee takes the blame. Lincoln was angry at the end of the battle at Union General Meade because he did not continue the attack and try to end the war. Lincoln said, "You should have chased Lee's armies down, followed them, caught them, finished them off." He didn't, probably because the Union army was exhausted. The battle was the turning point of the war. For the final 2 years of the war, the Union was consistently capturing ground and territory. The two armies had suffered between 46,000 and 51,000 casualties. The Confederates were beginning to suffer from shortages in soldiers and supplies, as we talked about. The South would never again be able to attack in the North again. Stay tuned for part 2, the Gettysburg Address.